Taxation without representation was a rallying cry for colonial Americans that led to the American Revolution. American colonies did not believe they were properly represented in the British Parliament and therefore were denied rights of English citizens. Today, many Americans do not take advantage or denied their representation in American government. I have become keenly aware of the voting apathy among U.S. citizens. Only 64% of Americans of the voting age population are registered to vote. Fewer than that vote. American elections have a very low voter turnout. What prevents Americans from voting? I will inform you of what I've discovered in my research. Low voter registration is one aspect of the voting problems in the U.S. Drew DeSilver, in his Pew Research article, "The U.S. Trails Most Developed Countries in Voter Turnout," states, the Census Bureau estimated that there were 245 million Americans of voting age in November 2016. About 157.6 million reported being registered to vote. That leaves 87.9 million non-registered voters, or citizens not registered to vote. Another problem is the low voter turnout, especially for primaries where we select the candidates for the general election and midterm elections. Alan Lichtman suggests in his article, "Voter fraud isn't a problem in America, low turnout is." The real problem with American elections is not voter fraud, but abysmally low turnout that ranks the United States near the bottom of peer democracies. Only 38% of U.S. citizens voted in the 2014 midterm elections, leaving about 140 million votes on the table. Next, I will tell you why Americans are not voting. Americans have several reasons not to vote. The elections held on Tuesdays make it difficult for voters to leave work to stand in potentially long lines to wait. That is one of the costs of voting to Americans. In the article, Americans just set a turnout record for the midterms, voting the highest since 1914 by Erdem Etek and Susan Stokes. They stated that political scientists have often emphasized that many people do not turn out because of the cost of voting, time, effort, and so forth. Also, people don't like their choices of candidates. They would rather not vote. In the NPR article, "On the Sidelines of Democracy," exploring why so many Americans don't vote, Asma Khalid, Don Gagne, and Leila Fidel state there are many millions of Americans who can vote and yet choose not to. The reasons are vast. Some are apathetic or too busy. Others don't like their choices. They don't think their vote matters, and they think the system is corrupt, so they don't think they know enough to vote. Americans also encounter roadblocks to voting. Voter fraud prevents some Americans to register to vote. Laws that have biases against minorities to have state IDs or street mailing addresses instead of P.O. boxes. Their voting precincts have changed locations, making it difficult for them to get there. My awareness of these previous factors enforces my belief there are very good reasons to vote. It is our duty to vote if we want the policies in place for a better life. As a matter of fact, Etek and Stokes also write in their article, believing there's a duty to vote kicks in when someone thinks an election is especially important. All elections are important if we are putting someone in place of power for several years who will be setting policy. Once elected, those people could be there for decades, impacting our lives far into the future. And speaking of policy influence, American votes help determine their policies. Once again, On the Sidelines of Democracy states, it ultimately influences which policies elected officials enact and whose interests candidates ignore and acknowledge. John Laley and Jonathan Nagler write in Who Votes Now, a growing body of political science evidence supports this common sense conclusion, that policy makers cater more to the wishes of voters than non-voters. Non-voters have very different views on what policies they favor versus those who vote regularly. Non-voters tend to be poorer and younger, and they favor policies that would provide them assistance. In conclusion, Not all Americans are exercising their right to vote is an issue. Others cannot vote. Many issues either prevent or deter Americans from voting. The reasons to actively participate in legitimizing representatives who will govern the nation are our duty. If we want a better life, we must make ourselves heard through our votes. Thomas Paine, one of the major influencers of the American revolutionaries, wrote in the Principles of Government, "The right of voting for representatives is a primary right by which other rights are protected. To take away this right is to reduce a man to slavery. For slavery consists in being subject of the will of another, and he that has not vote in the election of the representatives is in this case." Thank you.